Okay.
And I want to welcome, I'm David Gockley, General Director of San Francisco Opera. I want to issue a special welcome to our partner in Torino, Italy, the Teatro Regio, and Saverio Santo Loquido is on the other end of the communications device live seeing this presentation. So,
Oh, that's cool.
Saverio, welcome and thank you for being involved in this. So, without any further ado, I introduce Francesca Zambello, who will in turn introduce her team.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Okay. Oh, thank you. Hi. Ciao, Siverio. Ciao, l'Italia. Greetings, everybody. I'm Francesca Zambello. Very happy that you're here. We're going to talk about La Ciociara today, a world premiere that we're doing next season, a year from now, by Marco Tutino. Just a little bit of background on the piece. This is, first of all, a very well-known Italian film and novel. For some reason, the English title is Two Women. Of course, La Ciociara does not mean two women. It means a woman who is from the region of Ciociara. So it's like saying, you know, she's a Napa girl. And it is, the reason it is called Two Women in English is because it is a mother-daughter story which takes place during World War II in Rome and the regions outside of Rome, which are called Lazio. It was a well-known, as I said, novel, and then a film which was made famous by Sophia Loren. She was the first foreign woman to win an Oscar with this film. So the film is readily available on YouTube, and if you're working on the project, you might want to watch the film. You might want to read the novel as well, although finding an English translation was hard. I read it in Italian, but I'm sure that we can drum that up, can't we? So I want to introduce my collaborators. Marco Tutino is the wonderful composer. He is over there a lot closer to Saverio in Torino, probably having a delicious dinner by now. And my collaborators on this are lighting is Mark McCullough. Scenery is Peter Davison, and that's his associate Charles Quiggum there. And the costume designer is Jess Goldstein, who cannot be here, but we will discuss Jess's work. Christy will do it. Okay, great. So a little more background on the piece. I know that if you want to hear it, we had a kind of a sing-through recently where two pianos played and Nicola Luisotti sang the entire opera. It was really fun, and I'm sure that copies of that are available in the library for anybody who needs to hear it. The score is extremely melodic, completely inspired by the Verismo school of Italian writing. Verismo means real in Italian. Verismo basically starts with Puccini. It includes most of Puccini's work, Mascagni, and then several, let's say, composers who didn't fare as well, Leoncavallo, for example. But it's the school of Italian writing that is really big, passionate, full orchestra sounds, big voices. Of course, the best examples we know of Verismo are things like La Bohème, Madame Butterfly, things that happen in real time, that are very different than what came right before with Verdi. You know, with Verdi, we always have music that has, you know, repeats. Everything is written in an ABA form usually, you know, until he gets to Otello and Falstaff. So this music really is almost as if, and to quote the composer and Nicola, it's almost as if what we call the Vienna School did not happen. So the Vienna School is basically what began to happen in the beginning of the 20th century, where suddenly music turned to, it was not necessarily always tonal, the development of the 12-tone scale. Suddenly, you know, with Mahler and then later with Strauss and composers like Berg, music went in a very different direction. And in a way, Verismo was kind of like, you know, old-fashioned. So now we're, in a sense, doing a neo-verismo kind of piece. When you need to talk about it, you can talk about it in referring back to the music of Puccini. So that school of music, that sound, that orchestration, the kinds of voices are really that. And I just want to preface that. Is that, Kip, would that be a fair assessment musically of what we're doing? And the story is very realistic, happens in real time. It's a fairly dark, depressing story, and I think I will just, but with, let's say, a ray of inspiration perhaps at the end. The story, briefly, to give you a quick synopsis, is about a mother and a daughter. The mother is called Cesira, and her daughter is Rosetta. And it takes place, starts out in 1943, which we'll make sure everybody knows, in Italy and Rome, with our first projection on the front scrim. And this is, of course, the point where fascism is falling. This is now going to be a European history test in a moment. The Germans are swelling around Italy at this point. The people who collaborated with the Germans, the Italians who collaborated with the Germans at this time are called the Black Shirts. Fascism and Nazism share a certain root of a sort of perverse version of nationalism. Of course, Nazism went to a much greater extreme by destroying people who weren't part of what their nation was. And so it's very important that the city is in total chaos. And Cesira runs a very simple store, a negozio, the kind of corner store that you see all over Italy. Husband, N.A., and her daughter is a sort of young teenager, sort of 13, 14, 15, completely freaked out by the wars and the attacks. Every time that happens, she has to go hide in the basement. Cesira is a woman who sort of survives by her, eating onions later in the piece, who survives to make sure that her daughter is okay. And in doing that, she, in the first scene, works with a guy named Giovanni who's always been after her, and eventually actually gives herself over to him with the promise that he will take her and her daughter to the countryside, which is Ciociara, okay? So that's why they want to get out of Rome, get to the countryside where there's food. So in the second scene, as we move along, you'll see what happens is they get rid of Giovanni for a while, although he's sort of the villain character who will be played by Mark Delavan. The lead, La Cesira, will be played by Anna Caterina Antonacci. And so what happens is we then follow the mother and the daughter through a whole variety of events in the countryside as they try to survive through the war. And the eventual sort of outcome of everything is that the daughter, who is this sort of perfect flower of innocence, eventually emulates her mother's behavior of do anything to survive in a dog-eat-dog world, and loses her innocence and her purity in a very, very brutal gang rape scene that happens in the end. And so it's a statement on war, on behavior that happens during war, and also about this incredibly fragile relationship of mother and daughter and how it transforms and if it can sort of rebuild itself in the end. So that's a little summary on the piece. Now, what does the piece going to look like? The piece will use projections. The piece uses a small chorus, just a regular chorus here, 48, some supers, some kids. I think these are some suggestions of projections that will be used. Katie Tucker, who I know has worked here before, will be designing those. And this just gives you an idea of some of the imagery that, as you see the set model, because there are 4 projection surfaces. So, of course, what we're going to see now is a white model. It's not painted, nothing like that yet, but just so you have a sense of things. And then we'll go over the costumes maybe while we're doing a set change. So, everybody good so far? Here we go. So, there is a scrim and a BOC in the beginning. We start with projections that give us that sort of vital information in that kind of, cinema noir feeling. Italia, 1943, fascism has fallen. The Germans have invaded Italy. The Allies are preparing to land at Anzio, Allies being the Americans and the British, of course. So with there's a really short kind of, not even an overture, but just a vocal beginning, and then the curtain goes out, and we are in the shop of Chisira. You can stand up if you want to come closer or whatever. And we're at a thing where everybody is arguing about buying food. I'm not going to pay 9 lira for that. No, the piece is in Italian, remember. I'm not going to pay this much for that. I'm not going to pay this much for that. And we see, Chisira really struggling to keep herself afloat in this war economy. The surround this is a scrim. There's a wall sort of suggesting ruins. There's a small rake upstage. There's a projection surface upstage. And there's a number of kind of very important locations in the first scene. The shop, as you can see, the shop entrance from the street, so we have kind of Romans running around in the beginning. And then a sense of an upstairs, there's a staircase back over here, and then a basement where you go in the event of an air raid. The basement does not need a trap. We're not really going down the basement, so there's no hole in the floor. Okay? So basically, the projections tell us the story of setting us in Rome. There's an attack in the middle of the scene. So we have a sense of the bombing. We'll have, columns falling and props falling and God knows what else upstage, right, Peter? As everyone rushes down into the basement, a fire, city destroyed. And then by the end of this scene, the decision is made, shelves falling over, one of those kind of war scenes. And then at one point when she finally makes a deal with Giovanni, we put down the shutter, which is very important musically in the score, the shutter to close off the shop, and when they have sex kind of over the counter. So that's not over the counter sold, but on the counter. So that's kind of where we are in the opening of the piece. We want to jump in about some clothes here as well?
Yeah.
Sure, come on.
Well, she's, so we have Chisira. And
It's like my name, Francesca Chisira. Every time you have C followed by a vowel in Italian, it's CH. Okay, I tell everybody that because everybody's like, blah, 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 blah. Okay,
Chisira.
all right, okay. When you have CH, like in Carabino, it's a K. Okay, all right, okay, that was lezione numero uno. Okay, all right, okay, all right.
And she's just, she's in her kind of a little bit more sexy, naturally effortless kind of hairstyle and apron, and that's her in the shop. And as she, do you want to move on to kind of talk about her a little bit?
We'll kind of go on here
Okay.
a little bit. So what happens is at the
Very
end of
fine.
this, the scrim comes in and we do a scene change upstage and we have the train journey. You can see here some images of the train. And we see mother and daughter sitting in the train. And we do a kind of, travel log from, Stazione Termini out to the countryside. And they are really journeying out to the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, upstage of this, that shop unit actually folds into the wall very elegantly. And when we come up on things, we're out there in their countryside clothes, and
They add pieces for traveling and kind of moving into the countryside.
and we discover them bathing in a trough of water out here in the country. So now the projections will suggest something, idyllic, a scenery undestroyed by anything here. And they are bathing in this water trough out here, real water. And they are discovered by Michele, who is a young, sexy kind of Italian intellectual played by Stephen Costello. And now, of course, the love triangle sets in between Michele, Giovanni, and Chisira. So we also meet out here in this place, we meet a number of the people who are other refugees who have left town, the other kind of mountain people
On the other side.
you want to point them out
Yeah.
over there?
So they're, unlike the people of Rome, will be a little bit more rustic and a little bit more, mountains, more practical clothing, aprons and darker colors. Also kind of dusty and dirty from the war and from living out in the middle of nowhere.
Living out.
With little resources.
And so what we have then is then we kind of leave this part of things and we go to a sort of encampment of all these people because Michele brings them to live in this sort of encampment where everyone is, I don't want to say hiding out, they're just getting by. It's a war. And there's a real sense of, there's a huge prayer in this incredibly beautiful choral ensemble. Just a sort of amazing musical language that we hear that it's interesting to hear it 100 years after, it was a musical language. So we also meet a secondary character called Lena, who is over here somewhere, who's a young woman who's just had a baby in the midst of this terrible war-torn thing. Again, a kind of, symbol of sort of purity, trying to survive. And so we also then meet the character who leads us to the plot problem, which is a deserter named John Buckley from the American Air Force. And he has deserted. Now we have like another complexity because he is a deserter and Giovanni, remember him, the guy who really wants Cesira, figures out what's going on, and we then begin a chase of the sort of subplot of the piece of him trying to catch John Buckley, out him, and get back at the girl. So is there anything else we should add about Act 1? Roasting a lamb. Okay, Props wants to hear about that. Okay. Yes, while we're out here, we're cooking lamb, we're cooking food. It's a lot of innocent symbols. Lamb, the woman with the baby. Oh, my God. Okay. Oh, my God. Okay. And so they're out here. Yes, again, they're roasting a lamb out here. So we're going to have like a Sensorama smell effect in the auditorium, right? Okay. Looking at Lori. This could be a really good development idea. We could be serving lamb dinner before the show. Okay.
Jessica, one thing I think might be worth mentioning, these are all, they're refugees in this sort of encampment who've come up from the little village down below in the valley, Fondi, and in this first act, we see that village being bombed.
Yes, we have another bombing which happens during this scene, right.
And that results in this huge prayer where everyone, one by one, they all start praying for salvation.
Which leads to the finale of Act 1. So basically that is the world that we're in. So it's sort of the big plot is about the war. I would say the personal dramas are the mother and daughter, and then this love triangle which has now ensued, which gets very complicated by the American Air Force here. Okay, so moving along. Any questions so far? All right, Act 2, scene change. You want to jump in on any more costume things
I can
here?
just talk a little bit just about Giovanni in general. He's kind of also sells food and things, so he's kind of, if you think about that time, very, not distressed, but kind of, nothing structured, a little bit worn down. He would be a little maybe scruffy. Mikhail will be more, also because of the wartime, still this kind of theme of being broken down and a little bit dirty, but he'll also have, be a little bit more smart and a little bit more put together. And as we change into the winter time, there's going to be pieces added to kind of show how warm it is or how cold it is, and hats and scarves, and just the whole feel and mood will kind of change to winter. Colors darker, kind of that whole theme. And
I think it's also important to just to add, thinking about Michele, is that there's this sort of sense of the Italian intellectual subculture that's bubbling underneath all of this writing and historically through these kind of works. Also, just looking over here in the second act, we get into a kind of a lot of military, which we should look at while they're setting up, is the Nazis come looking for John Buckley. So we have the Nazis, then we have the Italian black shirts, which I mentioned before, the people who collaborate with them. And then later we are going to meet, there was a group of, believe it or not, Moroccan soldiers who were allied with the French, who are called Goumiers, who actually come through this town as well, who we're going to meet in a minute. So there's a lot of different military, and then of course the Americans appear at the end. So there's 5 different kinds of military in this piece, just to keep clear. We have the black shirts, the Nazis, the American Air Force, the Marines, and then the captain of the Nazis, Peter von Bach. I also want to say about the cast, I think it's pretty great. Anna Katerina Antonacci, who I think is also singing in the Trojans, is really this amazing artist who is just hasn't been seen that much in the States. So I think it will be a major thing for us to have her here. There was a wonderful profile piece on her in the New York Times a few weeks ago. Mark Delavan is no stranger. He was Wotan. And then Stephen Costello, has he sung here? He must have sung here.
He'll be singing and he'll be singing Traviata
He's,
this summer.
this summer he's in, is he here now rehearsing?
He's in the next.
Okay, he's in the next incarnation of Traviatas. Okay, fine, all right. A wonderful American tenor, obviously with an Italian name. So it's a pretty heavy-weighted cast. And then, Greg, is there anything else about the rest of the cast?
Sarah Schaefer, who debuted with us last year in Secret Garden, is a beautiful young woman who's in her early 20s but looks about 13, 14 years old.
Good.
She's got a very pure tone for Rosetta.
Okay. Yeah, that was a hard casting thing, finding somebody who can play that age. Okay, so the second act, we go to this town of Fondi, where we're having dinner with a local lawyer, and his, Pasquale Scortino, and of course his mother, who's feeding him. And it is here that we have the unraveling of the plot about, remember, John Buckley back in Act 1. So now we have the house. You can see the house is the, you want to talk about this? The house being the shop redressed? Could you go over that?
Well,
Darling.
we're using the same truck base, but we've put walls, and this piece could be either trucked or flown.
Are we good with that? We will be good with that. Okay.
And there's a kitchen behind it.
All right, so we have a kitchen back here, front door, bathroom. You know, there's a lot of very naturalistic things that you need in this. Dining room table, extremely far downstage, everybody eating. Laura, you're going to be so busy. There's the lamb, there's the pasta, there's the veal, my goodness. Anyway, what happens during this is that we have the sort of revelation of treason. We have a sense of impending threat about Michele, who Giovanni is out to destroy, which he succeeds in destroying him in the next scene. And this scene, interestingly, really works almost like a play, this scene, I have to say, because it is so much dialogue and so many of these characters coming and going, and such a sort of sense of almost a mystery of revealing everything. We then go from this scene back to the countryside. And you can see here, countryside starts to look very broken down as we move through the piece. And we go to something that is kind of like back in the countryside in Sant'Eufemia. The sort of two places we are in Italy is Sant'Eufemia and Fondi. And in Sant'Eufemia, what has happened now is the town has been destroyed, the church has been ripped apart, and we see sort of debris from the church all over the stage. People, things are getting worse for everybody now. The Nazis have come, and this scene happens, you can't really see, this is the church here. We can project on this surface as well. I should say when I said the 4 projection surfaces are the upstage plastic, this mid-stage diagonal scrim, a downstage scrim, and then something from up here projecting on this wall, okay? In this scene, what we have, and then this whole stage now is covered with debris from the church. Cross, pews, church props, destruction. And we now see here a kind of sense of two scenes going on at once. Giovanni ends up getting his revenge on Michele, who is in love with Cesira, and ends up getting him murdered by the Nazis, which happens back here and down here. Out here in the square, simultaneously, is this scene where Cesira and her daughter are trying to get away. They get entrapped by three of these Moroccan soldiers and a group of other soldiers, some supers, and they drag the daughter and her in the church, and there's this terrible rape scene which happens off stage. She comes out, and then she has this incredible aria where then she learns about the death of Michele, where she really talks about, you know, what have men wrought on the world? What has war brought us? And it's a very moving, very powerful, sort of almost closing aria, but not quite yet the closing. And then we go sort of for the final scene where we have the Americans arriving in their Jeep, of course, to save the day. And the Americans do, in a way, save the day. It's the end of the war, and you have a sense of, is it a possible new beginning for Cesira and her daughter? So basically, the whole rest of the piece plays out in this space with, you know, the environment changing with projections. So that's an overview of what it all looks like. Anything else to add here on the clothing front?
The only thing to add is that Giovanni, he also becomes kind of a part of the
Black
black
shirt.
So him and his gang, it's really, you know, important, wherever his gang is, that they all
Right there.
are kind of have those pieces of the Italian army costumes on, but all of them have the black shirts and mix of berets and hats, just to show that they're the people that change into
Well, the
army,
villains,
the villains,
really, in the
yeah.
piece.
And,
So that's a bit of an overview. Questions?
When they're on the train in Act One, heading out of Rome, are we seeing them in film?
Yeah, no, they're doing a lot of this acting. We'll do a window slot of them probably through a projection screen, and then they'll disappear to make a quick change. Yeah, no, we're not going to film them on a train in Italy. We're going to save money on that one. Well, all this Italian countryside, I said, let's just all go have a grand old time in Sonoma for a bit. You know, I mean, it does look like Italy when you go out there. Other questions? Thoughts, comments, suggestions, anything else that we can help everybody with?
I think everybody should read the Alberto Moravia stories.
Yes.
As a way of getting into that world.
Right.
And of course,
The movie.
absolutely.
Well, the thing, I just want to say, when you go online about the movie, there are 2 movies of the same title. Sophia Loren made it twice. Watch the black and white one. The color one is actually a TV show version that they did, which has 4 episodes, which kind of whitewashes everything. It makes Giovanni, who's the villain and the schlumpf, into a nice guy. It's very short. So watch the black and white film, the one that won the Oscar. Okay, and yes, definitely read the summer reading. Alberto Moravi, do not miss. We should make sure that they're selling that at a clean, well-lighted place.
And all his stories, because it puts.
Lori
you in
lives
that
in
world.
Italy, by the way, and is directing Traviata right now, if you don't know
The
her.
stories just put you right into that whole atmosphere. They're great. So.
I mean, this region, Ciociara, has things like its own shoes that people wear, which actually, you know what Birkenstock sandals look like? They came from Ciociara shoes. Also, all the women of these places, you know, they have a look which, you know, of course we think of all these kinds of very classic Italian faces, but again, Ciociara just has a very different look. It's interesting for Italy that it's landlocked. You know, most of Italy, you know, everybody has a coast. They have no coast. There's no river running through that area. It's a very different kind of, very earthy, peasant region. Okay?
And it's mountainous or hilly or?
It's hilly. It's hilly. It's hilly. When you think of the 7 hills of Rome and you go outside of Rome, they get bigger. All right, and then they go to what's called the steppes, the Marche in Italy, which then you go down. Marche is Latin for steppes, and then when you go down the Marche on the other side is when you come to Pesaro and Ancona and that part of Italy. So it is hilly. It is definitely hilly. It's not mountains, but it's very hilly. And rocky. It's a slightly not, let's say, bending terrain, but very beautiful. Well, yeah, I mean, okay. You know, we need to have lots of rehearsals with food, all right? Lots of restaurant visits, okay? Lots of sort of discovery time. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And any other questions? I'm sure there's going to be production meetings now or something afterwards. What's up, Jen? Is that up to you how that happens?
I don't think so.
But I'm happy to help. We have the room for about another hour.
Or Greg?
Like
Yeah.
a 10-minute break now, let people look at the set model and the sketches, and then we'll reconvene with just the technical cast.
Sounds ideal. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you. Okay, great. All right. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. Ciao, Severio. Ciao. Let's just say hello, Torino.